The United States has just endured its longest government shutdown in history, lasting a staggering 40 days. For nearly 6 weeks, the heart of the federal government was paralyzed, leaving millions of Americans uncertain about their future and the stability of their nation. This unprecedented shutdown began on October 1, 2025, when Congress failed to reach an agreement on a new federal budget. The deadline came and went, and with no consensus in sight, the government was forced to close its doors, sending shockwaves through every corner of the country. The main disagreement was deeply political. Democrats insisted on securing funding for healthcare programs, particularly the extension of critical subsidies, while Republicans demanded that the government be reopened before any further negotiations on healthcare could take place. The two sides clashed repeatedly, each accusing the other of putting politics above the needs of the American people. While essential services like the military, air traffic control, and emergency response continued to operate, the majority of federal agencies were shuttered. National parks stood empty, passport offices were closed, and vital scientific research was put on hold. The ripple effects were felt far beyond Washington, disrupting travel, delaying business, and halting progress on countless projects. The shutdown exposed the deep and growing partisan divisions within Congress. Lawmakers were locked in a bitter standoff, unable to find common ground. The American flag flying at half-mast outside government buildings became a symbol of a nation in distress. And the empty seats in the legislative chambers spoke volumes about the paralysis gripping the government. At the heart of the conflict was the future of the Affordable Care Act subsidies, which were set to expire at the end of 2025. For millions of Americans, these subsidies meant the difference between access to health care and going without. The stakes were high, and neither side was willing to back down. Democrats refused to support any funding bill that did not include an extension of these subsidies, arguing that health care was a fundamental right. Republicans, on the other hand, accused their opponents of holding the government hostage for political gain, insisting that the immediate priority was to restore government operations and address healthcare separately. As the days dragged on, the economic and social costs of the shutdown mounted. Commuters faced delays as transit systems cut back services, small businesses struggled to stay afloat without government contracts, and families across the nation anxiously followed the news, wondering when relief would come. The frustration and anxiety were palpable, as ordinary Americans bore the brunt of the political impasse. News reports painted a grim picture of a government unable to perform its most basic duties. Headlines screamed of dysfunction and gridlock, while images of empty federal offices and flickering lights became a daily reminder of the crisis. The sense of uncertainty grew with each passing day, eroding public trust in the nation's leaders. The situation underscored the inability of leaders to compromise, bringing the government to a grinding standstill. Negotiations stalled, tempers flared, and the prospect of a resolution seemed increasingly remote. The locked doors of government buildings became a powerful symbol of the impasse, and the frustration at the negotiation table was mirrored by the exasperation felt across the country. It was a crisis that tested the patience and resolve of citizens everywhere. As Americans waited in long lines for basic services, protested outside the Capitol, and watched the unfolding drama on their screens, the nation found itself at a crossroads. The shutdown not only disrupted daily life, but also set the stage for a dramatic and uncertain conclusion, one that would shape the future of American democracy for years to come. Over 1 million federal workers felt the shutdown's impact, as the government came to a grinding halt. For many, the uncertainty began with a sudden stop to their paychecks, leaving them in a state of limbo. These are the people who keep the country running, handling everything from airport security to food safety inspections, and their absence was felt in every corner of American life. Facing financial hardship without pay, families scrambled to cover basic expenses. Rent, mortgages, and utility bills didn't pause just because their paychecks did. Many federal workers found themselves dipping into savings, relying on credit cards, or even seeking help from food banks for the first time in their lives. Essential workers, such as TSA agents and Border Patrol officers, were required to show up for work, but did so without any guarantee of when they'd be paid. Meanwhile, others were furloughed, forced to stay home and wait, powerless to change their situation. The emotional toll was immense, as families worried about how long they could hold on. Many federal workers live paycheck to paycheck, forcing them to make difficult financial choices. Some postponed medical appointments, others cut back on groceries, and parents had to explain to their children why they couldn't afford certain necessities. The shutdown exposed just how vulnerable even stable government jobs could be. The uncertainty of the situation added stress, with no end in sight. Workers anxiously checked their phones for updates, hoping for news that would bring relief. Each day without a resolution deepened the anxiety, as families wondered how long they could endure. Beyond financial pain, the shutdown represented a betrayal for many dedicated public servants. Years of service and commitment seemed to count for little, as political gridlock left them stranded. The sense of pride in their work was replaced by frustration and disappointment. Morale plummeted, and many considered leaving for the private sector, raising concerns about a brain drain. The fear of losing experienced workers grew, as agencies worried about how they would recover from the loss of talent and institutional knowledge. The shutdown's impact extended to the services they provide, affecting public health and research. Critical projects were put on hold, and vital services, from food inspections to medical research, were delayed or suspended, putting the well-being of millions at risk. The closure of government services had a ripple effect throughout the economy and society. Small businesses that rely on federal contracts suffered, and ordinary citizens found themselves unable to access essential services, from passport renewals to housing assistance. It demonstrated the interconnectedness of the federal government with daily American life. Every community, no matter how small, felt the consequences, highlighting just how much the nation depends on its public servants. The suffering of federal workers was a symptom of a larger disruption affecting the nation. The shutdown was not just a political standoff. It was a crisis that touched millions, revealing the fragility of the systems so many Americans rely on every day. The government shutdown reached a critical breaking point in the nation's airports, where the effects of political gridlock became impossible to ignore. What began as a distant debate in Washington quickly turned into a crisis that disrupted the daily lives of millions of Americans, especially those who depended on air travel for work, family, or business. Staffing shortages among air traffic controllers, who were forced to work without pay for weeks, led to mounting chaos behind the scenes. The stress and exhaustion took a visible toll, as controllers struggled to keep the skies safe while worrying about their own families and finances. Many controllers, unable to cope with the pressure and uncertainty, called in sick. This created a critical shortage in the control towers, forcing airlines to cancel hundreds of flights each day. The ripple effect was immediate and severe, as delays and cancellations spread across the country. On November 9th, the crisis peaked. Thousands of flights were canceled in a single day, causing gridlock in major airports from coast to coast. Passengers found themselves stranded, with little information and even fewer options. Airlines like Southwest and Delta were forced to cut flights drastically, hoping to reduce the strain on the overwhelmed system. Staff scrambled to rebook passengers, but the sheer volume of disruptions made it nearly impossible to keep up. The airline industry, a major economic engine that connects people and powers commerce, was brought to its knees by the political stalemate. Airports that once bustled with activity now stood eerily quiet, their runways lined with grounded planes. The air travel crisis became a national news story, with reporters broadcasting live from crowded terminals and frustrated travelers sharing their stories. The shutdown's dangerous consequences were suddenly front and center for the entire country to see. The disruption didn't just affect vacationers. Business travelers missed critical meetings, families were separated, and vital cargo shipments were delayed in airport warehouses. The shutdown threatened not only public safety, but also the stability of the entire economy. The haunting sight of empty runways and deserted terminals became a powerful symbol of a government in crisis. With the nation's aviation system at a standstill, pressure mounted on lawmakers to find a solution and end the standoff before even greater damage was done. After 40 days, a breakthrough occurred on November 9th with a Senate vote. The vote advanced a compromise deal to reopen the government, breaking the stalemate. A small group of Democratic senators broke ranks, joining Republicans to pass the bill. Their decision was controversial, facing pressure from party leaders and the public crisis. They argued that the shutdown was causing too much harm and that the compromise was necessary. The bipartisan vote showed that compromise is possible, even in a polarized environment. The decision by these senators was a calculated risk, prioritizing ending the shutdown over party strategy. Their votes were critical in breaking the logjam and setting the government on a path to reopening. The compromise deal reopened the government through a temporary funding measure. It provided full funding for certain agencies and protections for federal workers. Federal employees were guaranteed back pay, and controversial firings were reversed. The deal also ensured full funding for food stamp benefits, a victory for Democrats. It was a temporary truce, not a permanent solution, pushing the healthcare fight down the road. The compromise gave both sides something to claim as a victory, ending the immediate crisis. However, it left the contentious healthcare subsidies issue unresolved, setting the stage for future battles. The shutdown's central conflict was over healthcare subsidies under the Affordable Care Act. Democrats demanded their extension, using the shutdown as leverage. The final deal did not extend the subsidies but promised a future vote. This promise was a major concession, trading shutdown leverage for a legislative battle. The outcome of the December vote is uncertain, requiring passage in both chambers and the president's signature. Democrats secured a chance to fight for the subsidies but gave up their most powerful leverage. The compromise created a division within the Democratic Party. Progressive leaders opposed the deal, seeing it as a strategic failure. They believed the party should have continued the shutdown to secure healthcare subsidies. Centrist Democrats defended their decision as necessary to end the shutdown's harm. The internal conflict highlights a tension between the party's pragmatic and progressive wings. The fight over the compromise is about the party's future direction and identity. The Senate's vote to advance the compromise bill set the stage for ending the shutdown. The bill needed approval from the House and the president's signature to become law. House Speaker Mike Johnson supported the deal, signaling a likely passage. The bill was expected to pass with bipartisan support, eager to end the shutdown. Once signed by the president, federal employees would return to work and services would resume. The deal is a temporary fix, with another budget process looming in a few months. The critical healthcare subsidies fight is postponed, ensuring another political battle soon. The end of the shutdown brings relief, but leaves deep scars. The compromise restored services and provided stability for federal workers. However, the Democratic Party faces internal division over strategy and priorities. The core issue of healthcare subsidies remains unresolved, with a future vote uncertain. The shutdown illustrated the costs of political dysfunction, harming public trust. The deal is a temporary patch, not a cure for deep political divisions. The next months will test whether this truce can evolve into a durable peace.